There are some extra seats on the front row. If anybody would like to sit, please come forward. Plenty of seats on the front. And I promise you, I will not call you out if you sit on the front row. We know. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to our school board meeting this evening. We have a very special night. We have a lot of our students here. To begin our meeting, I'm going to call forward Miss Tara Ward, the principal at Sampit Elementary School, to introduce, I guess, our special guest this evening.
Good evening, Chairman Gaskins, Superintendent Price, board members, district staff, and guests. I am pleased to introduce Christian Eli Sargent, a fourth grade student attending Sampit Elementary School. He is the son of David and Catherine Sargent. Christian is a member of our Panther Ambassadors leadership team, composed of fourth and fifth grade students. He also participated in the recent academic fair, and he portrayed Donner in our annual school Christmas program. Christian's teacher shared that he is a very eager student and enjoys learning new things. He is naturally competitive, but always demonstrates good sportsmanship. Christian is a role model for his peers. Besides being an outstanding student at Sampit Elementary, Christian participates in many activities in the community. Currently, Christian is playing upward basketball, and during the summer months, he runs track with the Carolina Gold Running Club. Christian has qualified for the National Junior Olympics 3 years in a row. Last summer, the event was held in Sacramento, California. Christian competed in 4 events and brought home 2 medals. For the triathlon and the shot put. Christian is currently ranked in the top 10 for South Carolina in 6 events: the 100-meter, 200-meter, 400-meter, javelin, shot put, and high jump. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Christian Sargent.
Good afternoon. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please stand for the moment of silence.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you. That young man has got a long resume already.
Pretty impressive.
Very impressive.
If you can go into the draft.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Would the rest of our school board members come forward for our special student presentations?
Do something with this shirt here, because it's on the floor.
And I'm going to ask Dr. Bethany Giles. This is one of our most special times when we can honor our students. And I'd like to thank all of our students for being here and also all of our parents. Thank you so much. Dr. Giles.
Thank you, Chairman Gaskins. Again, good afternoon, Chairman Gaskins, members of the board, Mr. Price, our district administration, and most importantly right now, our Georgetown County School District family. At this time, I have the honor as well as the privilege of recognizing our all-state student athletes from the fall 2022 season. 16 Georgetown County School District student athletes were named to all-state teams during the fall 2022 sports season. I commend each for not only excelling in their sport, but for also promoting academic achievement, sportsmanship, competitiveness, and fair play. At this time, I'm going to recognize each of the student athletes by school. I will be joined by the principal and coaches from each school. Students, please come forward as your name is called. First, Andrews High School. Andrews High School had 4 students named to an all-state team. Tristan Phillips, all-state volleyball. Brandon Cumby, all-state football. Rashawn Dorsey, all-state football. And Shafon Boyd, all-state football. Shafon was also named a North-South All-Star. Congratulations, Andrews High School. Carvers Bay High School. Carvers Bay High had 2 students named to an all-state team. Natalie Joy, all-state volleyball, and Tony Bell, all-state football. Congratulations, Carvers Bay High School. Waccamaw High School. Waccamaw High had 10 students named to an all-state team. Caden Greer, all-state tennis. Ansley Amay Flowers, all-state tennis. Kayla Holick, all-state golf. Savannah Prox, all-state volleyball. Abby Alott, all-state volleyball. Anna Margaret Loftus, all-state cross country. Gia Leone, all-state cross country. Lacey Grady, all-state cross country. Dawson Richardson, all-state cross country. And Wade Leventis, all-state cross country. He's at basketball tonight. Congratulations, Waccamaw High School.
You're not going to get them all too far.
And 3, 1, 2, 3. Take a bunch. All right, thank you, congratulations.
Oh, wait, don't we? Okay, okay.
Congratulations to those All-State members. This evening, I also have the privilege of recognizing one additional group of athletes, the 2022-23 Class 3A Waccamaw High Girls Tennis State Championship team, coached by Miss Mary Cannon and Coach Jerry Flowers. If Mr. Flowers will join us as well, if he's here. During the 22-23 season, 18 ladies were members of this program, competing and winning numerous matches before ultimately being crowned champions. The team defeated Philip Simmons 5-1 on November 1 to win the title of Class 3A Lower State Champion, and then defeated Chapman 5-1 on November 5th to win the title of Class 3A State Champions. This was the Lady Warriors' first lower state and state title since 2010. At this time, we ask that these members please come forward. Katia Contrell, Piper Connor, Ida Davis, Stephanie Davis, Elise Dozier, Izzy Dozier, Addison Flowers, Ansley May Flowers, Caden Greer, Leah Hammond, Emery Heineck, Illy Huntrari, Megan Madigan, Gabriella Martin, Evelyn Moore, Rowan Moore, Maggie Props, and Anna Weathers. Again, congratulations, Class 3A Waccamaw High Girls Tennis State and Championship team.
Again, I'm just going to take a bunch of pictures. On three. 1, 2, 3. Got one more. Thank you. Congratulations.
Greetings, Chairman Gaskins, members of the board, Mr. Price, district staff, and guests. Rosemary Middle School's Beta Club recently excelled at the 2023 South Carolina Junior Beta Club Convention, which was held January 11th through 13th at the Myrtle Beach Convention Center. The goal of Beta Club is to promote the ideas of academic achievement, character, service, and leadership among elementary and secondary school students. Achievement, this is recognizing and honoring high academic achievement. Character, preparing our students for life and empowering them to be successful. Leadership, developing the leaders, our leaders of tomorrow. And service, demonstrating the National Beta Club motto, let us lead by serving others. 5 of the club's members were a part of the first place winning team for apparel design. Rosemary Middle School's principal, LaTanya Goodson, if she will join me now, along with the advisor, the Beta Club advisor, Ms. Miranda Broach. If you would come and please join me as we recognize these students. Ellison Burdick. Carson Nesbitt. Emily Bratcher. Emily Barnes. And Caroline Gainey. Again, let us congratulate these students on their achievement.
Another photo op. Bryce, will you come down? 4, 2. Thank you. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you and congratulations.
Yeah.
You have to stay.
That's good. Some of these kids,
That's right.
you got it right now. Some of these kids play Parks and Rec with me. Now they make it on stage. It's very good. Man.
Room kind of empties now.
Good evening, Chairman Gaskins, ladies and gentlemen of the board. At this time, I have the privilege of recognizing 3 of our board members. First off is Miss Sandra Johnson. Ms. Johnson has achieved 15 years of school board service for Georgetown County School District, and she is currently our longest-serving board member. Even though Ms. Johnson is the elected representative for District 3, she attends and participates in events at all schools throughout our district. Ms. Johnson, we would like to thank you for the critical role that you have played over the last 15 years in guiding our district and the countless hours you have invested in improving public education. On behalf of the district and the South Carolina School Boards Association, I am pleased to present you a lapel pin for you to wear at school board and SC/SBA events, as well as a certificate of appreciation. And additionally, your name and years of service will appear in the program at this year's South Carolina School Boards Association's annual convention. Congratulations, Ms. Johnson. At this time, if I could have Ms. Ford and Mr. Gaskins join me down front.
Congratulations. That was exciting.
The South Carolina School Boards Association Boardsmanship Institute offers a year-round training curriculum focused on leadership skills for board members on state and national education issues. There are 6 levels of achievement, with level 6 being the highest level of recognition. On behalf of the South Carolina School Boards Association, I am pleased to recognize Ms. Lynn Ford for reaching level 3 and Mr. Bill Gaskins for reaching level 2 during the 21-22 fiscal year. You will each receive a certificate and pin representative of your level. We thank you for your commitment to Georgetown County School District and public education. Congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you. Congratulations, Bill.
The next thing on our agenda is public comments or requests. And we have not received any cards, so we're going to move on to our next item on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and it's been second. All in favor of the approval of minutes, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The minutes have been approved. The next thing on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Say aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Okay. The agenda has been approved. The next thing is the personnel list. The administration recommends the approval of the personnel list as presented.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and it's second. All those in favor of the administration recommend of the personnel list as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, say nay. The personnel list has been approved. The next thing on our agenda is contract for the fire alarm replacement at Maryville and Waccamaw Elementary and Waccamaw Middle School. The administration recommends the approval of a contract awarded for fire alarm system replacement to Control Management Incorporated, Columbia, South Carolina. The system being replaced with the award are as follows: Maryville Elementary School, Waccamaw Elementary School, and Waccamaw Middle School. The total base bid for all sites is $941,684.08. It will not exceed construction costs of $975,000 as funded by savings from the 2016 bond referendum monies. Control Management Incorporated has been deemed to be the lowest responsive and responsible bidder of record. Furthermore, the board authorizes the superintendent to execute the contract on behalf of the board. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and it's been seconded. Is there any discussion?
Chairman, just a comment that it has been funded by savings from the 2016 bond referendum, and I think, I'd like to point that out to our audience, that, the bond referendum monies have been used frugally and satisfactorily.
It has been noted. Thank you. Any more discussion? All in favor of approving this, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is carried and it has been approved. The next thing on the agenda, the administration recommends the approval of the 2021-2022 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report as presented. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
So moved?
Second.
It's been moved and it's second. Are there any questions? Hearing none, I call for the question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. The motion has been approved and it is carried. The administration recommends approval of the 2021-2022 procurement agreed upon procedures report as presented. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and second. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I call the question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is carried. The administration recommends the approval of the Howard Park proposal as presented. Is there a motion?
Option 1 or 2.
1, 2, or 3?
I guess my question is, which option? Why do we do that?
And I can answer that question. You may recall that we've done 3 different presentations on the Howard Park proposal. And so there were really 3 options that the board can consider. One would be to decline to move forward with authorizing the use of district property at Howard for this project. The second option would be to move forward with only the construction of basketball courts on the campus of Howard. And then the third option would be to move forward with the basketball courts plus the park concept that would go along with it in partnership with the city and the county.
Well, I have a question. Do we have any feedback from the community as to what they want as far as the park goes? Because I think they'll be the ones using it more frequently than the school.
I have not received any feedback, no, sir.
Okay.
The park could include 2 basketball courts.
1 or 2, depending on the available resources by the city. And they would fund the project for the basketball court installation.
And Mr. Price, also, does number 2 option include where it says the comment, the city, and it says that we will share 50% of the O&M? That is included in option number 2?
That would be in number 3.
Number 3?
If we went with the operations and management costs that would be incurred by the district would be for the upkeep of the park. And if we went with option 2, which was only for the basketball courts, there would be no park for the upkeep, so there would be no operation and maintenance costs to go along with that.
Do we have any idea as far as what's the construction cost?
No, sir. It was in one of the presentations about the cost of the basketball courts, and the city has already repurposed some existing funds to move forward with their part of an initial design for that. But for the whole park, it would require the board giving approval to move forward with the park. The city and the district would then write a letter of support to the county, and then the county would have to go through a estimate process where they get quotes and bids on everything that would be involved in turning that property into a park. So that piece would come later on. That would be funded by the county, not by the school district.
I just read something here where it said that we would share the construction costs.
The shared cost would be for operations and maintenance, and if the school district wanted to put any money towards the basketball court.
Okay, thank you.
And did I hear you right? You said the county would be responsible for what? Could you repeat that again?
So the city is going to fund the operations, the construction costs of the basketball courts.
Mm-hmm.
The park piece of it would come from the county, and they would go through their budget process. And if this moves forward at this point, then the county would take it up when they're considering their budget proposal for the upcoming years. And this project would only move forward if it was approved by them, the park concept.
Operation-wise, it would still be through the city opening and closing
Yes, sir.
and not the county.
That's right. As discussed, and it was presented at the last time that we went through the updates, that the city would maintain responsibility for that. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And all that would be drafted in an MOU to each party's agreement and understanding before being finalized.
That would happen before any construction takes place.
That is correct.
Okay. So we're basically, if we go with option 3, we are agreeing conceptually with this plan.
Right. And it would be contingent upon the county passing their budget to move forward with the park process, but they can't consider it unless the school district moves forward with the approval to use the property for that purpose.
So it's the county is still, we have not gotten the county approval for this. We're just sanctioning it to move forward with our use of property.
That's right. We're saying that if the county were to move forward and everything would fall into place and their funding would come through as been presented, then we would move forward. But if not, then we draw back and we start all over again.
Right. Okay. All right. So there are 3 options on the table.
Could I then make a motion
Yes.
for an option?
Yep.
I move that we approve the plan for option 3, that we approve the plan to join the city of Georgetown and Georgetown County in the construction of a public park as presented in the option. Do I have to read the whole thing?
Nope. So the motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and it's been second. Is there any further discussion?
Just one other question, just for clarification. So I'm looking on where it says comment, the school district, and it says here, share 50% of O&M annual costs for the city estimated. And then if you go down to action, I can scroll down here. Actions, it states again here, approve sharing and construction costs. So it sounds like that's 2 different ideas there.
Which slide are you on, Mr. Moore?
This is the Howard Park sample motions PDF file. If you go down to actions, you'll.
For that second green bullet, approve sharing and construction costs for the basketball courts. That was one option that if the city, and you may recall after this presentation had been finalized earlier that day, we had learned that the city would cover the cost of both basketball courts. So if any, it's not contingent upon whether or not the district contributes any funds to that. The city has already said they will take care of the construction of the basketball courts.
Right. Okay. Any other discussion? So I call for the question. All in favor of moving forward with option 3, please signify by raising your hand.
There's a question out here.
Oh, is there another question? The motion has.
We can't
Oh.
take a question from the floor, can you?
No.
You can't do that.
Yeah. Go ahead. So the motion has been carried. Okay? All right. All right, policy update, section B. And I'm going to call Ms. Lindsay Ann Thompson to come up. And we're going to look at BCA commencement of term of office.
Good evening, Chairman Gaskins, members of the board, Mr. Price. Yes, we have, that I'll be presenting to you, we have 4 separate policies that, to do first reading on. And we have them listed all as one item, but as we move through, and I know we're hoping to kind of take some policies as batches. So I was hoping that as we move through each batch, if we could take a first reading vote and a second reading vote on each individual item, just in case we get to the last item and we say, well, we didn't really approve the third one or something like that. So just for kind of record-keeping purposes, if we could, as we move along, if we could just take a vote on each one. And I don't think we have that. We had such small changes on all of these. I don't think we had them up on the board tonight, if that's all right.
It's fine.
Okay. All right, so the first one is, like you just said, policy BCA, commencement of term of office. And what we added in here is, at your discretion, the ability to have a swearing-in ceremony. And that would serve sort of 2 purposes: to kind of elevate the status of the swearing in, to make sure that we're honoring that process and not just kind of squeezing it in really quickly at the beginning of the next board meeting. And 2, it would allow board members to go ahead and act as board members as soon as their term commences. Because what we've run into is, particularly with November elections, and our meeting schedule, is that either we don't have a meeting immediately that matches up the timeline after Election Day and before Thanksgiving. So we kind of have this gap of time in there. So if you were to, at your discretion, of course, have a swearing-in ceremony, then you could act as board members as soon as your term of office commences, rather than waiting for our board schedule to shake out and match up. So that was something that y'all asked for, and we just put that in there. Of course, we put it at the board's discretion in case in one particular year that doesn't suit, but it sounds like something that you're all interested in and some other districts are doing, and kind of fits our needs.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the language that's in this policy?
I make a motion that I move that we approve BCA commencement of term of office as it is written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, now I'll open it up for discussion. Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
I had a question. So my understanding was 7 days after we were elected, we were on the board.
Right.
But we can't act as board members then, or is...
You
what does this-
could, and Ms. Thompson can clarify, but what the practice has been traditionally is that the installation ceremony didn't happen until the next scheduled board meeting. And what this revision in policy would allow would be for us, as soon as that the votes are certified, we could do a special installation ceremony where that's the only agenda item, where what we've done before is that was the first item of a regular board meeting agenda.
Okay.
And so this was a topic that was discussed at the board member retreat back in December, and the topic came up of having a separate installation ceremony so that all of that could be taken care of before you actually sit for your first board meeting, and then it's official that you're an acting board member, whereas you had the ability to take action, but you hadn't been installed yet because we had not had our first board meeting. So this gives us the ability to, as soon as we're able to, we get you installed, and it's very clear that way.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yes, I'm in agreement.
Any more discussions? All in favor of moving forward with adopting this policy, policy BCA, please do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The motion is carried. Moving forward with BCB.
Thank you. And we will bring that one back for a second reading at the next meeting as well, just for clarity's sake. This one is policy BCB, board officers. The only change here, and this is, I unfortunately, I don't think was able to articulate very well what I was trying to say at the last meeting, but for this one, you all were interested in having the board chair limit his or her term of office to no more than 2 consecutive 2-year terms. And as we discussed in our local legislation, we continued that we redid in 2021. We continued language that had been in there since at least 1962, saying all board officers were able to succeed themselves, meaning that forever and always, whatever board office you held, you could continue holding it until you were no longer on the board. And to make a change to that local legislation, we would have had to have gone to our local delegation. We would have had to have asked the state legislature to make that change, because it is in our local legislation. So in an alternative sort of move, we recommended or encouraged board members to limit board chairpersons to limit their terms to no more than 2 consecutive terms. So we're not violating the wording of our local legislation, but we're honoring the spirit of what you all wanted to do, which was to encourage your board chair to have 2 terms of 2 years, and then to step aside to allow somebody else to take that position. So that's kind of how that wording shook out, if that makes sense, just so that we could work a little bit more expediently, but also honor what you all had wanted to do.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I have a question. So what happens if one day our board chair decides that he doesn't want to give up his term of office or his position, and the board members want him to?
They want him to give it up, or they want him to keep going?
Right.
Well, if they want him to give it up, then they don't vote for him. If they want them to keep going, then you all would look at the policy, or whoever is in your seats in that time period would look at the policy and say, there must be a reason why we encouraged board chairpersons to limit their terms. Let's discuss that. Do we want to allow this chairperson to continue to sit for a third or fourth or fifth term? So it wouldn't be a mandatory change, but certainly if it were something that the sitting board didn't want the board chair to keep on, then they just would vote for somebody else, if that makes sense. Again, it's not mandatory language, and we didn't put the mandatory language in there because that would be a change to our local legislation. So if the board is still interested in the mandatory language that we absolutely limit the terms, then we have to kind of stop here and go to our local delegation.
I think it's a good idea to pursue at some point, just because it's always good to have a turnover in terms of fresh ideas every so often. I don't think any board should have a policy that says that someone can stay in an office until they vacate that office. I don't think that serves the board or anyone very well.
I agree.
I totally agree.
I agree with that.
If we're going to vote on this, then when it's time for them to go, then they go. There's no debate.
Right, okay.
So if we're going to vote on this, that's what it's going to be, 2 terms, and you're done, whether you want it or not.
Okay.
I guess my question would be, do we vote on the language that we want before it goes to the local delegation, or should we take it to the local delegation first to change the language, then come back and vote on it?
So you could do 2 different things. You could leave this the way it is right now without that underlined sentence, and you could direct us to speak to the local delegation and to have the legislation changed. Or you could vote tonight and at the following meeting to have this permissive language added in as a Band-Aid until we can get the local legislation changed. So it's totally up to you if you want to, use the Band-Aid language for the next 6, 8, 10 months, and assume that the local delegation will abide by that, in a few months, or you can just completely drop it right now, and we can, take the official change with the local delegation.
What are some thoughts from the other board members?
What constitutes local legislation? Who would we appeal this to?
So the local legislation, technically, we would have to speak to our 4 local delegates, and we would have to have one of them introduce this into the state legislature, and the state legislature votes as a whole on it. Then, once the state legislature votes, if they vote to, let's say our local delegation agrees that they're going to introduce it into the full chamber, and they agree to introduce it the way we have it written, then the entire state house, what am I trying to say? All the representatives, my words are gone, but in any case, they all have to vote on it. Assuming that it passes there, Governor McMaster will then veto it. He has historically vetoed all local legislation. He's very much opposed to the concept of local legislation. Then we will have to have it overridden by the legislature after that. So it's and that probably will happen. That's what happened with our first local legislation. It's not a deal breaker, but it is not a simple rubber stamp process. It goes through several months. We'll have to work with the legislative council up there at the state house to make sure that the language is appropriate. It's not a deal breaker, but it's multiple steps that take multiple months to get done.
So the change to the language would apply to all boards in South Carolina or just Georgetown County?
No, we have an odd thing that both the governor and the state Supreme Court are opposed to, but in South Carolina, our delegates have the ability to introduce legislation that is applicable to only one county or one delegation at a time. So, for example, Sumter County could have a completely different, and does have a completely different local legislation governing their school board. Greenville County has one, Horry County has one. They're all different, and those are pieces of legislation that are in state law, not just in local board policy. I think we're an anomaly in the U.S. with that, but so we have policies and procedures that vary by county that are also in state law. Sorry.
You done said 1,000 things there, okay, so...
I know, and I don't think I've said anything that made any sense yet.
Let me go right to the meat of it, because a lot of that stuff went head in everywhere.
Fair enough.
What do we do to get this language in there?
So you said when? What was your question? I'm sorry, sir.
What do we do to get that underlying language in there?
you tell me that you want me to talk to the local delegation and make it happen.
I think, I would agree, let's go straight to the local delegation, to have that conversation before we move forward with
A lot of
any
time,
change in
We
language.
just started with a new chairman, so we got time.
Right.
Yep, got time.
Change here for, yeah.
That's true. You do have a couple
Would you
years. Okay.
Would it be okay to summarize our options and send it to us so we can study that?
Absolutely.
Because I've heard about 3 or 4 different things, and I'm not sure which one we need to pick from.
Absolutely. We can, if you so choose, we can table the discussion for tonight. I can summarize it all in writing, send that to you, and let you know kind of the various steps that we could take, and we could bring it back for a first, for a,
Just headlines. Personally, I don't need a
I'll
lot of
make the
detail.
motion that we table this discussion.
thank you. I think that's a great motion.
I second.
I think I can. Board chair can make a motion, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, there's been a second. Yes, sir.
Do you want to call for discussion?
For discussion? Is there any discussion?
Just to point out that the way the draft is currently written would not require any legislative action. It just says board chairpersons are encouraged. If you want to change it to board chairpersons are limited to no more than 2 terms, that's what takes legislative
Correct.
action.
Right.
So the way it's printed now, no legislative action required.
Right.
But to remove the words "are encouraged" and make it mandatory would require legislative action. Just want to make sure that
Okay,
point
but
is clear.
I think
Thank you.
Lynn Ford makes a good point. I think, I think it's not a good practice to have somebody that can just sit in a seat.
I agree.
Regardless of whether, I thought, my understanding was the board elected its chair.
Right.
But what I'm hearing is, we elected you,
And he can stay there
and I
forever.
like you, Bill, don't take this the
I'm
wrong way.
glad.
Now you're stuck.
But if you got in a mood that you just wanted that seat from now till forever,
Right,
there's nothing we could do about it.
I don't,
Could, because we vote for the board
Every 2
chair
years.
every 2 years.
Every 2 years, yeah. So you can vote him
Okay, so
out.
we'd have, every 2 years, we could elect a new board chair.
right.
But, I feel like some folks on the last board, they just felt committed to the person that's been there, and it was just stamping back on there, and the same thing could happen here. So I feel like there need to be something else in place to be able to make changes.
Right.
Okay, we do have, we've already had a motion on the floor to table this. It's been moved and it's been seconded. I'm going to call for the question of tabling it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, say nay. The motion is carried, and we'll table it and possibly come back at our next meeting.
Yes, sir. And I'll go ahead and start checking on the changes that could be made.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
The next thing is agenda format, agenda preparation and dissemination.
And I believe we've gone from the most complicated to the very least complicated.
We
And
hope.
all we're doing here is changing the phrase 1 week to 7 days at the end of the second paragraph, just to clarify when the agenda would be received by the superintendent. That's all it is.
Is there a motion to move forward with that?
So moved.
It's been moved, and it's been, is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and second. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Please say nay. The motion is carried. And moving on to ICA, school year calendar.
Yes, sir, thank you. For this one, you all had asked to change from kind of 2 separate changes. 1, for district administration to present 2 calendars at a time, and 2, for that to be changed from being approved in the fall, in the spring of the preceding year to the fall of the preceding year, to give more time for planning and that sort of thing. So there's 2 separate changes there, both in that calendar, or under that paragraph under school calendar, that I think you all requested.
Is there a motion to move forward with this?
Question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is this to say we're approving the calendar 2 years in advance?
Yes, in the fall of the preceding year, you would be looking at help me get this right, Mr. Price, to get
Sure.
get my
So,
numbers right, my school years
For
right.
example, we've already got next year's school calendar approved.
Right?
So that if this new policy is adopted, then in early fall, we will bring you the school calendar proposals for the next 2 years.
2 years.
So you would have the 24-25 and 25-26 draft calendars for approval. And then every year thereafter, we would keep the calendar process approval 2 years out. So every year, we would bring you a calendar that's 2 years out.
What is the advantage of that?
Planning purposes, so that you know that it's locked in. The earlier, what we've gotten back is whenever we've made some shifts in the calendar, that folks try to make plans throughout the year and in the summer accordingly, based on our calendar, and the sooner they get that information, the sooner they can lock in their plans. And if we were to go to 2 years out, it would give them even more ability to do that. So that would be the purpose behind that. And I believe Ms. Ford was the one who broached this topic, and please feel free to add in anything that you'd like to add, but I believe that was part of that discussion.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've gotten feedback that many families like to plan their vacations, and Boy Scouts have their events, and they plan their vacations in advance, and it often occurs, in the summer, and when we move our calendars, then that'll impact their planning, and it's a significant impact.
And I think all of us on the board have received emails about this in the past.
Chairman, I have a question. Approving the school calendar, the number of years we've talked about, Keith, there's been a lot of talk, obviously, about year-round school. I hate to bring that three words up, but it has. If we approve the calendar years in the number of years that you've proposed, that would be for the modified calendar.
Correct. One of the process that we went through last year was seeing if our district was interested in pursuing the concept of a modified calendar. And based on survey results, they were. So at the last adoption, we presented a modified calendar and a traditional calendar, and the modified calendar was largely accepted. And so the board voted at that time to move forward with that proposal. And so as we work to move forward in planning the future calendars for the next 2 years, it would probably be a similar process. But the thing that I would be weary of is jumping back and forth between the versions, that we stay consistent for a period of time and to see if we want to stick with that version or not.
Yeah, and that was my point. So it'll be based on the modified calendar that was approved.
That's correct.
Great.
Is there a motion to move forward with this policy?
So moved.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and second. Is there any more discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion is carried, and now we're moving on to BHD, and that Mr. Price.
Well, thank you.
All right.
It's okay. There's an off switch that goes with that, but that's okay. It works. Good evening again, Chairman Gaskins, ladies and gentlemen of the board. As Ms. Thompson was describing earlier, we kind of jumped back and forth to some simple tweaks to some more complex discussion. And policy BHD is a little more complex than some of the simple revisions that have been considered with the previous. So after the last discussion at our last work session, there were lots of discussion about different directions that this policy could go with regards to board member compensation and expenses. And I'll put this up as you see, this is how the policy is currently written. And at our last discussion, there were three parts of this policy that led to quite a bit of discussion. And there were lots of ideas, lots of suggestions, lots of questions about the three different parts. And so I'm bringing these back to you tonight for further consideration and discussion to try to gauge which direction the board would be interested in moving in with regards to this policy. On this slide, you'll see that the three sections in question have been highlighted. One, the first one in yellow, dives into the point of compensation for the board. As you recall, all trustees with the current policy, their supplement is based on 25% of the base teacher salary. The board chair is 35% of the base teacher salary. But in June of '03, the board voted to freeze their compensation at the rate paid for the '02-03 school year, which rate was based on the applicable base teacher salary, and it has remained frozen to this day. And so part of the board's discussion was, do we unfreeze? Do we look at the amount? Which direction do we go? So we're going to dive into that piece a little bit deeper in just a moment. The second piece of this policy is outlined in green. And this would take into effect after the first piece is decided upon. It's when does this take effect? And there are lots of different options that were discussed at the last board meeting. And so the board will need to provide further clarification and direction about how to identify when any change that is taken would go into effect. The third piece of the policy is outlined in blue. And this one was I think we had a consensus on this immediately, and that was board members may be reimbursed for mileage to and from board meetings. And no one is doing that. We don't know that anyone has ever done that to put in for reimbursement. And that includes attending school events throughout the district. What the practice has been is getting reimbursement for any travel or conferences that are attended outside of the district. And so the intent, I believe, for this piece of the policy was directed around that. So let's dive into the compensation piece. I was asked to do a comparison about some surrounding districts and districts like us. So I looked at the 4 surrounding districts, Horry, Charleston, Berkeley, and Williamsburg. 3 of those are significantly larger than Georgetown County. 1 is about half the size, a little less than half the size. And then I pulled one other PD area district that was nearly the same size as Georgetown, Darlington, for comparison. So you see the number of students where Georgetown is at approximately 8,150. You've got Horry with 45,000, Charleston at 49, Berkeley at 37, Williamsburg at 3,200, and Darlington at 9,300. You see a comparison of what the base teacher salary is in each of those districts. You will also see what the board member's stipend is and the board chair's stipend for each of those districts. I also did a calculation so that you could see what the percentage was of the base teacher salary. Our policy is written as a percentage of a first-year teacher salary. I don't know that there's any other board compensation policy in the state that's written the way ours is. So I tried to do some comparison with regards to percentages. If you look at Georgetown right now at 67.19, when that was frozen in 02-03, that was 25% of the base teacher salary. Right now, that represents 15.8% of the base teacher salary. So I'll give you a moment to look at how other school districts in our area, as well as one that's nearby that's similar in size, how their base teacher salary looks, their board member stipend, and their board chair stipend. We also looked and discovered that there are 28 districts that do not pay stipends to school board members. And you will see that these school districts vary across the state. Some are larger than Georgetown County. You see the school districts and the number of students for each school district in parentheses. So you'll notice that some are larger than Georgetown, some are smaller than Georgetown. And we added one asterisk here, one note, that several districts who do not pay a stipend, they do reimburse board members for their travel to and from school board meetings, to and from school functions. So there are some districts who do compensate board members for their travel to and from those district-wide events. Not all, but some. So diving into different options about the first part of that policy that deals with compensation. So the first option that's presented here is option 1. And this is to remove the reference to a percentage and or a freeze and specifically state the current amount and leave it as it is. This was one of the recommendations or suggestions that was mentioned by at least one board member at the last meeting. And so if the board were to go with option 1, then basically it would say board members receive compensation for their services as determined by the following formula. All trustees make $67.19 per year. The board chair makes $94.06 per year. That's a difference between trustee and chair of about $26.87. That's what the current stipend is. So one option, option 1, is just remove the language that references frozen and lock it in and leave it. That's one option. Option 2 is to adjust the rate to a slightly higher specific amount, but not the full 25% of the base teacher salary. This was another option that was discussed and mentioned by at least one school board member. $8,000 was one example that was specifically mentioned. There was no, if we went $8,000 for each trustee, there was no specific reference for what the board chair's specific amount would be, so that would be something that would need to be considered. So, for example, the policy may read, board members receive compensation for their services as determined by the following formula. All trustees make $8,000 per year. The board year makes $10,500 per year, about a $2,500 difference. I'm going back one slide. You see right now the difference between trustee and chair is $26.87. If you were to go to an $8,000 and a $10,500, you would have about a $2,500 difference. So the difference between a trustee and a chair is slightly less than it currently is, but keeps it in a round number ballpark. Option 3 is to establish a monthly amount. So this would change the whole concept right now. It's written in an annual amount, but to change it to a monthly amount, because this is what some of the other school districts do currently. So board members would receive compensation for their services as determined by the following formula. All trustees make blank amount per month, and the board chair makes blank amount per month. And so I looked at different options of what this may look like. You see the $600, $700, $800, and $900 per month for the trustees and what that would mean annually. And with a similar difference in range for the chair, $8,000, $9,000, and $1,200. So that's another option. It was mentioned to see what do some of the other districts do. So this is what some other districts do. So I'll give that to you as a third option. The fourth option is to change the percentage of the base teacher salary from 25% to one of the following options. This was part of the discussion last time that maybe 25% was too much. So we would need to adjust the policy to say board members receive compensation for their services as determined by the following formula. All trustees will make blank percent of the base teacher salary, and the board chair will make blank percent of the base teacher salary. So there's a wide range. And those are listed here. I've got currently what that is. $67.19 was 25% in 03. And so if we were to change it to 16% of the current base teacher salary, that would take your annual stipend from $67.19 to $68.16.48. And you see what those percentages would look like. So if you didn't want to go 25%, but you wanted to go a different percentage, you could go anywhere from 16 to 25%, as was discussed. And with the current chair at 35% of the base teacher salary starting at $94.06, I started at 26% and carried it all the way up to 35%, which would be $14,911.05. So option 4 would be changing the percentage of the base teacher salary that's paid to school board members. So those are your 4 different compensation options based on last time's discussion. Tried to capture that to bring it forward. And so what the board will need to do is to discuss those different options, or if there's another option that wasn't presented here that you may want to consider. So that's one piece. And Mr. Chair, we can stop and have discussion about that piece before we move on,
Yeah,
or I
let's
can
do.
keep going and then do it all at once.
Let's stop and have a discussion about that piece.
If I could, I'm going to share a few more tidbits of information.
Okay.
Because they were asked before I go on to the second part of that policy. There was a question at our last meeting is how would this impact the remaining budget? So if the earliest we could give a second reading approval would be February 21st. And if that was to unfreeze the policy and go straight to 25%, what would that look like? So the current remaining budget for board stipends right now that we have planned for from February 21st to June 30th would be $23,684.40. That's already budgeted for. If we unfreeze, that means the new remaining amount would jump to $37,543.77. So that would mean that we would have a difference of $13,859.37 for the remainder of this year with this budget. Okay? The other question was, what would it do to next year's budget? So right now, if that first slide I just went over just talked about from February till the end of this fiscal year. What about next fiscal year? And what would we have to do in the budget to account for that? That's this next slide. The current annual allocation for board stipends each year is $63,158. If we were to unfreeze and go to 25%, that new allocation would jump to $100,117.05. So that's a difference of $36,959. That difference would need to be added as a line item in the 23-24 budget so that we could plan accordingly. So that completes the first part of that policy, and we'll open it up for any discussion or any questions.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is, and I've asked you before, but I felt like the answer would be applicable for everyone. How the changes that we potentially make here would impact the budgets of our, or the salaries of, if we want to look at salaries for our bus drivers or our cafeteria workers, et cetera. How does what we do here impact that section of the budget?
Well, it wouldn't do anything to their stipends at this point. And if we were to go to a full 25%, we would be talking about a difference of just under $37,000. And so that would, if you take that and spread it out over all of our employees, in the big scheme of a $100 million budget, and our budget is just under $100 million, around 99.45, it's right there in that ballpark. It wouldn't significantly impact our ability to grant pay raises.
Okay.
But it would be something that we would definitely need to account for
Right.
for our planning.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Cox?
Yeah. First of all, at the last meeting, I probably beat this dead horse to death, and I apologize for that, but it's something serious we need to look at. And what I figured out was the horse is not dead. The horse is just frozen. That's what we've inherited as a board. What we got to remember as a board, and I want this to be stated on the record since the press is here, this is not something that this board created. We're just trying to solve a problem that originated in 2003. So I want to be crystal clear to everyone that we're not asking for a raise. We're not asking for a raise. In 1997 to 98 school board year, there was a board just like you see up here that unanimously or by majority approved a 25% stipend based on the current teacher base salary. That we know for sure. We also know for sure that for the next 5 years, when teachers got a raise, the board got a raise. We know that for sure. We also know in 2003 that number was frozen at $6,719. We know that for sure. We also know that it's been frozen for 20 years. We know that for sure. So I'm going to make a motion in a few minutes, but I got a couple more things to say just to clear the record, is that this great board and this great superintendent has inherited this problem that originated 20 years ago. This is not anything that we've created. We're trying to solve the problem on hand. So this is a suggestion, or we can call it a motion, Mr. Chairman. If you wanted a motion, I can make it a motion, or I can just throw out a recommendation.
I'm going to leave that up to you.
Okay, so,
Then we can discuss.
well, I'm going to start with a recommendation because I respect every board member's opinion. So currently, we're at $6,719, which, if you do the math, is currently a 15-point-something%. And we've been frozen at that for 20 years. I feel like in my heart that in 1997-98, when whoever made the motion to pay board members 25% of a teacher's salary was wrong. Too much. That's just my opinion. But it was done. It was initiated for 5 years, and it became frozen for 20. My recommendation is, in life, there's always a happy medium for everything, we hope. Currently, we're at $6,719 at 15%. 25% would be an increase to $10,650.75 plus or minus. I want to propose a happy medium between 15 and 25% of 20%. That comes to $8,520 plus or minus. That would be my recommendation, that percentage drop a total of 5%, and that we vote on that effective immediately.
Now, Mr. Cox, is that a recommendation or is that a motion?
I can make it a motion. $8,520, 20%.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor.
That's my motion.
We have further discussion?
We will not discuss until it's been moved and seconded, since he made the motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second. So now I'll open it up for discussion. Mr. DeBose.
Well, since I was throwing numbers around last time, I'll throw some more this time. So I want to echo something that Robert Cox said at the last meeting, is that at some point in the past, had this salary been unfrozen, we probably wouldn't even be having this discussion tonight. We would have gotten our regular increases. The last salary, teacher salary, we'd have gotten an increase, and we wouldn't be having this discussion. So again, it is an issue we're dealing with, and we've got to figure out, in my mind, we need to figure out some metric, some measure that we all agree, that the board agrees is fair and representative of a lot of things around us. I just want to speak to the boards that don't get any pay. I think that's fundamentally wrong. I don't know. These boards are elected positions. I think they are throughout the state. I think you have to run and get elected. And for them to not pay people, it's not like they just raised their hand and said, gee, I'd like to be on your board, or somebody reached out and said, hey, I want you on my board. Congratulations, you're now a member. You have to run for election. And for most of us, that costs money. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money. And oftentimes, you don't get reimbursed for what you put out there, for yard signs, brochures, all the things that go into running a campaign. So I think it's fundamentally wrong to not pay a board something. Now, in the state of South Carolina, I think the lowest board pay that exists in the state, besides zero, is like $100 a month. So, with that said, I agree with what Robert said, that we ought to, whatever we agree to, we ought to move immediately. And it's an interesting number that Robert threw out. So the number I came up with, just crunching numbers, was $8,000. And if we wanted to stretch it to $8,500, I could justify that too. And I can tell you how I got there. It's a lot of detail. I don't know if we want to go into it. I'm happy to go into it. But a couple of points to make as well. The average salary in the state of South Carolina for a board member is $6,705. So we are at the average. Now, over half of the boards in South Carolina that pay board members, 56% of them pay more than we do. And if you look at the average of what they pay, that average is $8,596 of those 19 boards. Now, if you look at the 5 counties that surround Georgetown County, their average is $8,950. However, we've got Horry County, which is very, very high, and we got Williamsburg that is very, very low. If you take those out as sort of outliers, and you just look at the 3 counties that don't include them, you come out at $8,000 as an average. So, in my mind, somewhere about between $8,000 and $8,500 is the right number, based on what I think is kind of looking at the state of South Carolina as a whole and looking at around Georgetown County. If you start looking at those averages, somewhere in that league is what makes sense. If you just wanted to use that, if you wanted to say, well, it ought to be a percent of the teacher's salary, we could figure out what that was. And I've also got a recommendation for the board chair salary as well, if you want to hear that.
Yeah, but first we need to act on the motion that's been made.
Okay.
Before we can look at some other options. Is there any other discussions about the motion that Mr. Cox has brought to us?
I think I'm a little concerned about putting anything into play now. I mean, I understand it's been frozen, and also look at my experience as an educator in Georgetown County, and there were years before and after the freezing of the board that teachers did not get raises. And I know that's in the past, and I know we're getting better to that, but I'm also looking at the idea that, you know, almost half of us are new. And you come onto a board and you go, okay, the first thing I want to do is give myself a raise. When, you know, we've had to fight for years and years to get everybody in our district raises. So I'm a little concerned about that. I don't have a problem with the amount we have now. I have a problem with moving this to, you know, jump up immediately. Maybe making it into effect in the next election cycle, and maybe the $8,000, and I'm also looking at the other districts around us. Even if we drop the highest and the lowest, you're still looking at districts that have, Berkeley County has 37,000 students, and I don't know how many employees they have, but they have more employees, and I know the basic idea of a board, we're doing the same basic work, but we're not, because we're representing different areas and different amounts and that sort of thing. So what I'm saying is that maybe we, just because Berkeley County is making X amount of dollars, we don't necessarily need to make as much as they do. Does that make sense? I don't know, I might just be rambling, but, right.
Yeah. My comment on not taking effective now, this thing's been frozen for 20 years. If we're going to wait and phase it in 5 years, we're just literally freezing it again. It's time to unfreeze it. That's my recommendation. It should have never been frozen for 20 years anyway. So if we're going to phase it in, we're going to be right back to where we were. And again, guys, it's not about money. I would do this job for free, honestly. But we're frozen. If we're going to take action, let's take it now. Let's don't wait till the next election and bring it back up. If we're going to release it, unfreeze it now, don't phase it in, make it effective immediately on my motion or whatever. But we don't need this to tarry another 4 years.
Mr. Cox, I respect everything that you've said. I get it. Where I disagree with would be the 20%.
Okay.
And when I go to looking at the district website with jobs, when a starting salary of a full-time custodian is $23,500 or $400, or an instructional assistant who starts out making a little bit less than $18,000 a year. I like the idea of having a scale and moving forward, but I think 20% for me, I can't support that.
Comment. I think 20%, we're not talking 20%. I think we all agree 25%. I hear what you say. But I guess my point is we can find 100 different rationales for not doing this, that the board will never get an increase if we keep bringing things like that up. So, and again, I don't think we're sitting here asking for a raise.
We're not.
The only reason we got into this policy discussion, I think, is because we decided we were going to review the policies for the board and discovered that the board pay had been frozen for 20 years.
That's right.
So I guess my point is, what point is served by delaying it? If we're going to increase it at some point, is it fair? Sandra here has been on the board for 15 years. All the time, never got an increase that she was entitled to according to policy. So we're now saying to Sandra, wait another couple of years and we're going to think about this. I think that's fundamentally wrong. Patty's been on the board quite a while. Randy's been, what have you been on the board, 6 years now? They didn't get increases. And they were entitled to them under policy that for whatever reason we never reviewed. So I think we ought to set on a number. We ought to institute it immediately. That's where I come out.
In this discussion, I'd like to go ahead and call the question on this motion that's been made, because if it fails, we can look at something else. So I'd like to call the question. All in favor of the motion that Mr. Cox made at 20% and releasing it now, please vote by raising your hand. So, 2, those who vote nay, please raise your hand. All right. The motion fails. Okay. Would someone like to introduce another motion based on this option?
I move that we move to 8,000. And in making that motion, let me tell you what 8,000 is. $8,000 places Georgetown County School District less than every board that pays more than us, over half the boards in the state. Less than that. 8,000 places us below the average of the 5 counties that surround us. 8,000, what we're doing is $2,665 less than what the policy, had we been voting on that, would have raised it. Since 2003, teachers' starting salaries have increased 59%. $8,000 represent an increase of 19% for the board after 20 years frozen. So I guess I'd love for somebody to, why we would not implement a salary, why we're going to delay it.
So you're making the motion that
That we
we,
move to 8,000
1,000,
for the board members effective tonight.
about board chair.
Board chair. Would you like me to speak to board chair?
Sure.
Board chair, I looked at the board chairs, trying to find some metric that measured the percentage difference, and I didn't have them for the whole state. But if you look at the surrounding counties, the average percentage of the board chair salary above the member salary was 21%. So what that would do for the board chair, if 8,000 would move that to $9,700 for the board chair. As opposed to, for the conclusion I came to is that our board chair is too high. If for instance, if we kept to the 25%, that board chair would go to, or if the current ratio, if we held to that with 8,000, the board chair would be 11,002. My recommendation is that we stick with the average of the .21, and it takes it to 9,700.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you're making a motion that trustees be paid $8,000 a year, and the board chair $9,700 per
Correct.
year.
Correct.
So now we have a motion,
I have a question.
okay?
Is I think there's still some, I like what you're saying. I think there's still an issue with whether it's to take place now or to take place the next election cycle, which is in 2
Well,
years.
we can
we split it?
include that in the motion, or we can come back and vote on that separately.
I think it should be separate.
It's a separate, yes, sir.
If I may, Mr. Chair, if we probably are not going to be able to have a first reading approval tonight.
Right.
But if we can dissect these different pieces and get an idea where the majority of the board is leaning, we can bring that part, the first reading approval, back at our next meeting. But if we could go back, kind of what I mentioned at the first part, if we could take these in 3 sections, with one part being compensation, the second part being when it goes into effect,
Right.
and treat them separately. One proposal may not get denied because of one piece. If we can take it one piece at a time, that will give us a direction to come back and bring one solid policy for you.
Sounds good. So we have a motion just on the trustees being paid $8,000 a year and the board chair $9,700. Is there a second?
Question.
Second.
We have a second. Now, are there questions?
I have a question, which I don't know that, I can't do the math, but how would that impact? So if we decided the 8,000 and the 9,700, we were looking at the 25%, how, if it went into effect immediately, how it would impact our remaining budget.
All I can
So
tell
we
you
need
off the top of
figures
my head
on
is that
this.
for the rest of this year, it would be less than 13,800 because that was at 25%.
Right. So it
And
would
the
be-
8,000 that you're referencing falls right or somewhere between 18 and 19%. So that number here was calculated at 25%. So for the remainder of this year, it's going to be less than 13,000.
$12,000.
Mr. Chairman, if you look at my motion and Scott's motion, it's literally $520 and 1% difference in my motion. I'm good with the 8,000. The only reason I did a 85-20 was 20% is an even number. If we use 8,000, there's going to be a decimal. Do the math. It's going to be like 19.2 or 18.3. I was just trying to find an even number instead of a decimal. But it is 1% difference than my motion. That's all.
My question would be, then our policy would reflect a flat rate that would not change, as opposed to a motion that would say that we were going to adjust it at 20% in the policy for what board members would be paid. So the 8,000, am I to understand, that would be a flat rate across the board until that policy was revised again?
Yes, ma'am.
And I think that's the difference in the two motions to me.
Yes.
That if indeed the board is to be compensated, we would agree on an amount the board would be compensated going forward. And it would be not frozen or unfrozen, it would just be a flat amount.
That is what the motion has been made.
Yeah, and I love that.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I find myself looking down towards my senior board members, because my concern was that I'm the new guy. I don't know what amount of work that I'm going to really have to put in. I know I've done a lot already, but hey, look, it's what I signed up for. So I'm really looking to my senior board members to say, hey, look, this is what we should have been paid. I know I can't make you tell me what you think you should have been paid on the record, but I'm really looking for some guidance on this right here. My concern is, like I said in the last meeting, is that I don't want nobody to think that I came up here concerned about paid as frozen or not. I don't care about that. So I'm really looking at you guys, because I don't want to disrespect the work that you guys have done over the years that you've been here, and me just coming here and say, hey, look, we need to make $20,000. Okay, I exaggerated.
I hear exactly what you're saying. The work of the board, there's work. There is work. It's time. It's gas money. But I think none of us are here after talking with each and everyone. We're not here for the money.
Absolutely not.
We're not here for we're here for the kids. We're here for the staff.
And we're here trying to solve a problem we didn't create.
We did not create
We
this.
never even voted on the 25%. If I'd have been on the board on that 97, I probably would have turned it down. To me, that was just too much. Okay?
Yeah, at that time
So
it
this
was
is not a situation that this great board and this great superintendent created. We're just trying to solve the problem and unfreeze the policy.
And I would agree. I think we're trying to solve a problem looking at the actual salaries that exist that board members are paying across the state and the county surrounding us. And this notion, I'd love to get rid of it, that somehow we came on the board as newbies here, and we're trying to figure out a way to get a pay raise. I think that's outrageous. I want to go back to what Robert said earlier. We're trying to solve a problem, and we better at least figure out putting a stake in the ground of what we're going to measure against, if nothing else, or we'll be dealing with this forever.
Absolutely.
And part of what I'm hearing is the board probably never will get another raise, and I don't think that's realistic either.
It can be revisited, because part of the job of our board is looking at policy, revisiting policy. So if we don't come back and look at it in a couple of years, it'll be a failure on this board's part.
Right.
And when I became chair, that was one of my goals, is that this board be very active in reviewing policy. I'm the one who chose this policy to look at, because I knew it was going to be the most difficult one, the biggest discussion.
Right.
I like the direction that we're going in now. I'm very comfortable.
Well, I thank you, Bill, for reviewing the policy, because I've been here 6 years, and I've unconsciously ran any and everywhere that I needed to be as a board member. That never came up in 6 years until you started to review this policy now. I never knew anything about a frozen policy. But now that I do know, there are some things that just don't measure up as far as what we do and not being able to move with inflation a little bit, not a lot. And what I'm hearing here now is, regardless of inflations, we won't move. I just don't hear a lot of support for that. but nobody else travels with you when when you got to pull out your wallet to do things, and know what you're paying. So, I really think there ought to be some consideration. And I like what Ms. Hamill said. Maybe we come up with a set salary that just it's not frozen, it's not unfrozen.
Well, I'm going to call for the question. All in favor, do so by raising your hand.
Are we in favor?
What question is that now? Bring me back.
Can you clarify what we're voting on? Just one last time? Just one last time.
I'm sorry.
Bring me back.
Your new chairman is having difficulty here, so we'll get it right.
Yeah, one last time.
The motion on the table is to lock in trustees' salary at $8,000 a year and the board chair at $9,700 a year. That is the motion. It's been moved and it's been seconded. And I'm calling for the question. All in favor, please do so by raising your hand. All right, all opposed? All right, the motion is carried.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving on to the next portion is when will it go into effect? And 5 different potential options for the board to consider. Number 1 would be immediately upon the final approval of the board. So once second and final reading has happened, it would take effect immediately. Option 2, this was if we wanted to, one board member talked about a phase-in process so that it wasn't all at once, and to phase it in annually with an amount not to exceed clause until that gap is closed. The third option would be 50% that was suggested would be 50% of the amount would be effective immediately, and the full amount would come after the new budget year and the new budget has been adopted and the increase is accounted for. So that was one option that a board member suggested at our last meeting. Option 4 would be wait until the new fiscal year. And then option 5 that was mentioned was to wait until the next election cycle. So there's 5 different options that ranges anywhere from immediately upon final approval of the board or not until the next election cycle.
Okay, there are 5 options that's open for discussion or for a motion.
I initially liked the idea of it being after the next election cycle, but since the amount is not that big, then I could be in favor of it more immediate than the next election cycle.
What's the date, Keith, on the next fiscal year budget? What would be that particular date?
That starts July 1.
July 1 of this year?
Yes, sir.
Was that a motion
The
that
first,
you made?
the first payment,
No, that
the
was-
first change in payment would be the July 15th payday,
Payday.
So maybe the new fiscal year.
if you waited for the next
Yeah.
budget cycle, the next fiscal year.
I personally think the cleaner we make it, the better off we are.
Yes, yes.
I'm going to be very honest. I like Lynn was very much, I looked at the next election cycle. I've looked at the next fiscal year. But if we're going to amend policy and we're going to make it straight across the board, and we're going to just say we're changing our policy to say this is how much the board would be paid, I tend to think that the cleaner, the better, and just, it's a done deal, and we don't have to deal with phase-ins, and
I agree.
and we're not doing percentages.
Right.
We're not saying that for hereafter, every year, you're going to get a huge amount of money or raise, and it's not that impacting to our budget at this point. When you think about the amount of money that's impacting our budget, it's relatively small. It is not going to, I do want to say, it is not going to influence how much we work to give our employees every penny we can give them. Because that's my goal as a board member.
Absolutely.
Is to be sure that we're taking care of our people. And that doesn't mean just children. That means our staff. That means our employees. That means everybody. And as hard as we can work to get dollars in places to be able to help our children and our employees, I want our public to know that's exactly what we're going to do, and we're going to work arduously to be sure that happens. So I think the cleaner we make it,
So it sounds like you're saying option 4.
Would someone like to make a motion?
I move that this policy goes into effect in the new fiscal year, which is option 4, after the new budget has been adopted and the increase is accounted for.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor that this increase would take place in the new budget year. Is that correct? Okay. We have
I second that motion.
a second for
That
discussion.
new budget year is,
Starting July
July 1st.
July 1st. There's no further discussion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion is carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and we'll move on to the final portion, and this involves the available reimbursement for mileage to and from board meetings. Based on last discussion, the recommendation would be to scratch that line from the policy and add the words "outside of the district" to bring us in alignment with current practice. So board members attending meetings or conferences outside of the district related to their duties as board members will be reimbursed for all reasonable and necessary expenses incurred, including airfare, lodging, meals, rental cars, and travel.
Is there a motion to move forward with this?
I make a motion that we scratch travel inside the district. I make a motion that we're paid outside.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion is carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and ladies and gentlemen of the board. And if it pleases the board, rather than having first reading approval tonight, and rather than trying to scramble to come up with all of the input that we've gotten, if it pleases the board, we will bring this policy back with all of the discussion points that have been had tonight, and we will bring this policy based on your input and your votes for first reading approval at the next board meeting.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Price.
Thank you.
We agree. Thank you. All right, moving forward, it is time for board comments and requests, or superintendent comments and requests. Is there any comments or requests from our board?
I'd just like to make a comment in regards to the discussion we've had. Once again, I intend not to make any implication that I think any of us is up here for the money, but it's always going to be the public perception that I'm always going to consider.
Hey, I'd just like to say something about all the athletes that received awards tonight. It thrilled me to see some kids that I had in Parks and Rec since they were 5-year-old to come up and they've earned all-state awards. That really thrilled me. There's one particular kid, seemed like I knew him forever. I thought he'd been out of school. But he came up here as a senior and received his all-state award. That was pretty cool.
Anybody else? Well, one thing I'd like to make a comment. I really love seeing students here at our board meeting. I hope we can bring more students in the future. Hopefully that'll be a regular thing in our board meetings. I really do like that. I look forward to, it just makes the meeting so much better, to seeing our students and involving them and having an audience here.
Nice to see faces on what we're doing here.
Absolutely. And if you don't know, there's a special treat Friday evening at Andrews High School at 6 o'clock, all-county chorus at 6 p.m. If you can, be there. Now I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and ladies and gentlemen of the board. Let me begin by commending all of our elementary and intermediate students who participated in the academic fair 2 Saturdays ago on January 28th. This was the first academic fair we've been able to hold in 3 years due to COVID. So it was so exciting to see our students showing off their academic skills and representing their schools so well. I can't wait until next year's fair to see Browns Ferry, Andrews Elementary, Pleasant Hill, and Waccamaw Intermediate defend their titles. Last week, we were honored to have Mr. Dion Jameson speak to our teacher forum. Mr. Jameson is the current South Carolina Teacher of the Year, and he delivered a powerful message on what we stand for and who we stand with. Congratulations to the Waccamaw Middle girls and Carvers Bay Middle boys basketball teams who won the conference championships last night to cap off 2 incredibly strong seasons. This week is School Counselors Week. As you're out and about, please share your appreciation to our counselors who work incredibly hard to support students and teachers in building positive and effective learning environments. February is also Love the Bus Month. So please be sure to show some love to our bus drivers who transport our precious cargo to and from school every day. This Saturday, there will be a Guys and Ties business conference at Georgetown Middle School to promote career opportunities for the teenage young men in our county. It's never too early to begin thinking about and preparing for pathways after graduation. February 15th will be a half day for students due to professional collaboration activities for our teachers. Pre-K and kindergarten online registration will also open on the 15th and will run until March 14th. And as Mr. Gaskins mentioned, the All-County Chorus Concert will be this Friday at 6 o'clock at the Andrews High School Auditorium, and I look forward to attending the South Carolina School Boards Conference with our board members on the 17th through the 19th. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And at this point, our meeting stands adjourned.
Got one thing,
Yeah.
big game Sunday.
Oh, big game Sunday.
Don't forget the big game. Super Bowl.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.